And it's at Vanessa. We know that in the FNAF novels there's a character who ends up being revealed to be a robot, that person being the main character, Charlie, Henry's daughter, the one who gets killed by Aft and then goes on to possess the puppet. But this begs the question, since it's now established that characters can be robots without even knowing it, is there someone in the game series who could have this be the case? And some people now are thinking that it's the case with Ballora and Vanessa from Security Breach. While yes, they're both female characters, when you think about it, the two have more in common than you think. Firstly, if Vanessa is a robot, it would explain how William started controlling her through the virus, since sentient code shouldn't really be able to affect organic matter like the brain. Also in the books, Charlie's robot is also revealed to be Baby, who can shift between her forms using the pins that we see in the trailers, you know, like the pins that and the blueprints and yeah, so the technology is there, especially when both Baby and Ballora come from the same group of animatronics. And at 9, Mother Figure. Some also believe that whether she is Vanessa or not, that she was intended to be a form of mother figure for Afton's kids once their mother left or died or whatever happened to her. Maybe she never even existed. This is based off the mini arenas that Ballora basically is a mother towards, and the fact that there would be one for each Afton kid and then another spare. Now this could be William just having mommy issues, or it could be a secret fourth Afton kid like I've proposed in the past. And if that is the case, perhaps Vanessa was intended to be that kid, hence why she'd be a robot. Or Vanessa was just the human version of Ballora so the kids wouldn't freak out about having a literal robot that looked like a robot as a mom. But then again, it could just be Afton wanting to be treated like a kid and have someone to hold him and make the pain go away. That's definitely not the healthiest option, but it's something Sigmund Freud would be proud of. Also guys, if you're enjoying the video and you want to see more, be sure you hit that like button and subscribe because we put out daily FNAF content whether I want to or not. So do it. And at 8, Surrogate Family. The mother figure idea could have been extended to the rest of the Funtime animatronics or those that would have been at Circus Babies. Because while yes, the animatronics were made to grab kids and their restaurants was in essence a murder den built after his old one closed, Afton did at least make Circus Baby for his daughter, or at least in her image or based on what she likes. Since after all, his kids was his prime demographic. It's a whole other can of worms too, let's not get into that. His family was basically his focus group, and maybe that's why Ballora is so slim thick, he was talking to Mike a little too much. However, this could have been the downfall of the business, since if he did actually base some of the animatronics off his kids, that could have been their downfall. Especially because Funtime Freddy, Foxy, and Baby each represent one of his kids, with Freddy being Crying Child thanks to his unfortunate incident at the sister location, Foxy being Mike because, you know, Foxy bro, and Baby being Elizabeth for other obvious reasons. It could have also been William's ultimate undoing if you think about it too, because like Mike, because Mike is the one who stopped him. Yeah. And at 7, Lonely Afton. Or maybe this was never for his kids. After all, Afton is a man, albeit a deranged one, but even the most deranged men have needs. So maybe Ballora was a little more than a mother figure for the kids, or at least intended to be more. After all, we know she represents someone that William didn't let into his life, whether that be after his wife's exit from his life or Elizabeth's death. But even then, if we start to think about it, thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR, we know that the Funtime animatronics were among some of the first ever animatronics made by Afton. And if this was the case, Ballora would have been around before Elizabeth got caught by Baby, especially if she was made for Circus Babies. So after Afton's wife or baby mama leaves him or dies, he finds a woman who wants to help him. However, he doesn't let her into his life and instead makes a robot version that won't judge him and can probably do other things as well, because let's face it, William wasn't in the brightest mindset. And if you think about it, there could be a reason Ballora is flexible. Obviously, to help out with work around the house. Where's your mind at? It's gotta get down low to get up in the attic. You know, it's a small attic. You gotta do like the crab walk. It's easier with an animatronic. What were you thinking? Sickos.
Number 7, Mrs. Afton's soul. So one of the prominent theories when it comes to Ballora is that she is the wife of Mrs. Afton, in spirit form at least. Some believe that Mrs. Afton died. A lot of people actually believe that this happened as the result of a car crash due to a popular FNAF music video that circulated and somehow became considered canon by fans, despite the fact that this has yet to be confirmed in-game or in any of the books. Regardless, many fans have theorized that following her death, Mrs. Afton's soul lingered on this earthly plane. coin within Ballora, and that Ballora is, in essence, possessed by Mrs. Afton. The song Ballora sings in Sister Location has often been used as evidence to support these claims, although there are a few different explanations for those lyrics. Number 6. Not big on pretend. Circus Baby at one point in the game remarks how Ballora never learned how to pretend. Some believe this is an indicator towards Ballora's personality, and have even implied that Ballora does not like to play pretend because she is too mature and more grown up than Circus Baby in terms of her personality. Others have theorized that Ballora is simply not a fan of playing pretend, and for this reason did not like Circus Baby's plan, sensing early on that it might be flawed. It also makes sense that Circus Baby would be inclined to pretend though, considering that she seems to have kinda two sides to her, and also the fact that it's heavily implied that she can shapeshift to a certain degree, disguising her appearance. Depending of course on which continuity we're looking at, as to how much she can shapeshift. Number 5. Replacement Mrs. Afton. Another theory suggests that Ballora was simply made to fill in for Mrs. Afton, filling the void in William Afton's life after his wife left him. This also seems to be supported by the lyrics to Ballora's song, which seem to be quite sad and lonely in nature overall. Ballora mostly talks about being alone, implying that someone refuses to acknowledge her presence, which makes her lonely. However, the final lyrics in the song suggest that Ballora finds joy in her performance. She sings, "It's so good to sing all day, to dance, to spin, to fly away." This could even imply if Ballora was meant to be a stand-in for Mrs. Afton, programmed to be similar to her, that Mrs. Afton found joy elsewhere in her life. And so, with William making her sad, she chose to, as the lyrics say, fly away. Perhaps Mrs. Afton left William, which is why he created Ballora. He was sad about her leaving, and so Ballora is meant to be some kind of creepy replacement? Number 4. Loss. As I said, the meaning behind the lyrics to Ballora's song have been a topic of heated debate amongst fans, and the idea that these lyrics refer to Mrs. Afton speaking out with her own voice from within Ballora, or simply repeating Mrs. Afton's own thoughts as a sort of animatronic version of her, are not the only theories to explain them. Some have also speculated that the lyrics could refer to the loss of a child, and whether or not Ballora is Mrs. Afton could be a reference to Mrs. Afton's and perhaps even Mr. Afton's grief. "All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb" could specifically be a lyric referring to the death of either Elizabeth or that of Crying Child, or perhaps both.
Getting close to the end, into number 3, Frozen Solid. Speaking of being frozen solid, could FNAF AR be giving us hints as to how Mrs. Afton or William's baby mama bit the dust, kicked the bucket, played her last song, ended the show, pushed up daisies, slept with the fishes, pegged it, the big adios, the forever nap? Because let's be honest, there has to be some reason for these godforsaken skins in the game other than to keep people playing and spending money on microtransactions, right? Okay, well maybe not, but it's fun to speculate. Ballora currently has 2 skins in FNAF AR, Arctic Ballora and Clockwork Ballora, obviously not including her original form, and both of these could be related to potential deaths. Clockwork is slightly more complicated, but most likely would represent dying of age, since, you know, a clock tells time. However, from what we know, William at that point wasn't really that old, so his wife or partner probably wouldn't have been that old either. So what about Arctic Ballora? Well, this could mean many things, but most likely freezing. Perhaps she fell into a lake that she thought had enough ice on top of it and froze, or maybe she just got stuck in the cold. Maybe she was an adventurous person and tried climbing Mount Everest or something, or got stuck while skiing and froze. We don't know. And while it may be a little far-fetched, it's still fun to think about, since there is no evidence for what happened to William's baby mama, or even if they were married. We don't know. Penultimately, in at number 2, the first. As I mentioned earlier, thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics are among some of the first robots built by Afton, which means that they were built around the Springlock era. While this doesn't do much for the timeline because we had already placed it around there, the question remains, who was the first out of the Funtime animatronics? And actually, some think that it's Ballora. Some think that thanks to William losing someone he loved, that he made Ballora as a replacement, but then had to create the other Funtimes due to questions from his kids or something similar like his neighbors, cause let's be honest, I know what you were thinking during number 7, alright? And that is definitely what his neighbors would have thought as well, especially his friends. So if he builds other robots in this set, it instantly makes it work and not a personal project, I guess I should say. And with Ballora being the first of them, it makes sense that she wouldn't have any of the other abilities, like a claw or a containment chamber to seal away items, since, you know, he wouldn't have thought of that at the time. He only wanted to seal one thing away. His grief. Get your mind out of the gutter. Finally, and at number 1, Clara Afton. And here we go again with the good old-fashioned Clara Afton. That sounds kind of like a Wild West thing, but if it was a Wild West thing, it would be Clara Clayton. Haha. Yeah, it's for you Back to the Future fans. Quite a few people believe that Ballora is actually possessed by Mrs. Afton, even though there is no signs that indicate such, but the community doesn't really care about that. They also seem to think that this mysterious woman is also named Clara, and that's due to the wonderful world of fake TV in a fake world. The character of Clara popping up in sister location is certainly not something to ignore, even if it is on a fake soap opera called The Immortal and the Restless. However, the name is not confirmed. Perhaps if we knew the actor who played Clara in that show, that could make more sense, but just because a woman is talking to a guy wearing purple doesn't mean that she's Mrs. Afton, okay? If I wear purple and I talk to Amanda, does that mean that Mrs. Afton is now Amanda Afton? No, because my name is Connor, not William. However, the character a lot of people seem to be comparing to William, justifiably may I say, is named Vlad in the show. So why would a character who represents William be called Vlad, but the character meant to represent his wife uses her actual name? It makes no sense, okay? Until it's confirmed, I'm not calling her Clara Afton, so stop telling me to in the comments. Stop saying that's her name, okay? It's not confirmed. Knock it off, alright? Good. And at 10, Ballora. There is the popular theory that Mrs. Afton goes on to possess Ballora. However, I don't really like this theory, because, you know, just don't. Many people who associate the name Clara with Mrs. Afton also seem to believe that she went on to possess Ballora, and I don't know why there's such a high percentage that believe both, but still. The reason I don't like this is that it's assuming too much, okay? It assumes that she wasn't alive when he made the robots. It assumes that she ended up dying in an agonizing way when we don't even really know what happened to her. And it also assumes that she was around Ballora when she died, or that a possessed object somehow was used when creating Ballora or something, okay? But that would be an incredible chain of events, because William did not know about Remnant at this time. And if Mrs. Afton ended up possessing Ballora, I'm sure that William wouldn't have opened Circus Babies, and if her death was the reason he started killing people, which we have no idea about, then seeing that she possessed a robot would actually probably stop him from doing that, because she would still be alive. Yeah. Also, especially when she's in a dummy thick robot. And I mean, her song is in reference to another woman in his life, or at least it can be. So yeah, I doubt that he would have hid inside of walls from his actual wife. And at 9, final reason. What if Mrs. Afton was the catalyst to all of this? What if she was the one who pushed William over the edge, gave him the ideas, gave him the kids, and then vanished or died or left him, whatever the case may be? What if Mrs. Afton was the one behind it all? I mean, honestly, a combination of these theories could be correct. I mean, like, further on in the list, you know, but like, she also just could have been a psycho or a hallucination. Maybe she died and then possessed Ballora, maybe she didn't. There's so much in the realm of possibility here that we can never really be certain unless we get told directly by Scott. But maybe William was driven to killing by his wife, be it directly or because of her death, or their divorce, or whatever the case may be. It would explain why he didn't want to hurt his kids, despite being a certified nutcase, but the closest kid to William other than his own kids would have been Charlotte, hence why she was the first to go. I mean, if the mother died or divorced him, his children would be like the last things that connected him to the love of his life, so I don't think that he would really want to hurt them, but yeah, I don't know. We don't know. That's the point. That's the whole point of this list. These are theories, alright? Don't get mad. I know you've already gotten mad. And it ain't divorce. I mean, it's possible again. There may be another reason as to why Mrs. Afton isn't in the picture anymore, and it might not be death. The explanation may not be as brutal as you're probably thinking, at least for her, since I'm sure the divorce settlement would have been horrible for William, especially when he owned a company. The only real way that this could be true is if, like, they divorced before William had gone into business with Henry and bought Fredbear's Family Diner, though, unless they ended up having a prenup. However, a prenup wouldn't really be necessary if he didn't have anything, so we can't really be sure. But I mean, that's half the fun though, right? The matter could just be simple, with William and his wife splitting or getting a divorce for a plethora of reasons, but then that could also be why she's no longer in the picture. It doesn't have to be something dark and depressing or sad, you know? I don't know. She could have just cheated, or William could have cheated. Just based on what we know about William as a character, creating personal relationships isn't really a top priority for him, and neither is keeping them, so maybe the missus just felt neglected, or maybe she was pushed into the arms of another man, so we can't really be sure, but it's something that we can't really rule out. We can't just be dead set on her dying, even though it is also a likely possibility given who we're talking about, but come on. I'm just surprised that William ended up with the kids if they did get a divorce. And at 6, missing children. We also learn in the FNAF novels, along with the fact that Charlie is a robot and is also baby, that the Funtime animatronics are actually possessed. But instead of them being filled with agony from specific children, they're full of the original remnant created by the first 5 missing children. You may think this throws a wrench into the timeline, however, they were just simply modified to contain the remnant instead of being created with it, so the timeline still holds. But does this mean that the Ballora from the games is also possessed with the agony from the 5 missing kids? Candy Cadet in FNAF 6 does talk about 5 things becoming 1, and that only really makes sense with the 5 missing children becoming remnant to be injected into the fun times. But then that's still confusing because then, like, would it exclude baby? But it would also make sense since the robots do end up coming together in the form of Ennard to have their souls be complete. But people also think that she's possessed by Mrs. Afton, even though there is not evidence for that in the slightest. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below. Halfway through into number 5, Mrs. Emily. Even if Ballora isn't Mrs. Afton, who does she represent? Some believe that it could be Mrs. Emily, Henry's wife, the mother of Charlotte of the puppet. Now, why would they think this? Because of William's kill list. Now, Susie may have been the first of the missing children to die, but it's still widely accepted that Charlotte is the first kill overall, which makes it the most significant. After all, killing your partner's daughter is definitely out of the norm, kind of. But most murders are committed through intense emotion, with love being a very common one. So why would William kill Charlotte out of love? Because of her mother. You see, Charlotte, when she was killed, was very young, probably around 3 like her novel counterpart, which means that Charlotte's parents have been together for at least 3 years, and before that, she could have been with anyone. For example, trying to be with William in the aftermath of his wife's death. She could have met Henry this way too, and their child would be a burning reminder of what William had missed out on. Or maybe Charlotte was keeping Mrs. Emily with Henry, so William got rid of her, hoping that he could be Mr. Steal Yo Girl. I don't even think Scott knows at this point. Straight up. And at 4, voice line meaning. Ballora's song has always been an interesting point to talk about. With lines like, "All I see is an empty room, no more joy in empty tomb," we figured out pretty quickly that William was mourning someone. However, some theorists look at the song in an entirely different way now, since after Ultimate Custom Night we got to hear Ballora say, "Admit it, you wanted to let me in." And while that could remain, "you wanted to let me into your life," what if it's more literal than that? What if it's actually he didn't let someone inside somewhere? Maybe whoever Ballora represents wanted to help William in his quest for answers, wanted to help him kill, and he didn't trust them enough, or maybe they were stuck outside in the cold and ended up freezing to death because William was too selfish or something. I mean, there are also signs to indicate something like that. Maybe not as extreme, but Ballora's song also says it's so good to sing all day, to dance, to spin, to fly away. And who would say that to a mourning man unless they were at least as sadistic and horrifying as him? I don't know. There's also the fact that she could just be referring to Springtrap because he was stuck in the walls. He was hiding inside the walls when there's music in those halls. And ultimately, in at number 2, doesn't exist. Is it possible that there was no Mrs. Afton to begin with? Yes. Like I said, anything is possible. William was already crazy at this point, and maybe he created the delusions of him being in love with this woman, who then he made her image into a robot, and then he paid for kids, or maybe he made kids as robots, and then he ended up adopting maybe as well. Who knows, okay? He's the single father of a large company like Fazbear Entertainment, so I'm sure getting kids could actually be kind of easy, but then again, he's a male, and they're less likely to actually be approved. Who knows, okay? It's all about the connections that he had, and maybe he got to skip a psych eval, because, you know. This would put into question, like, the whole animatronics thought Michael was William at first kind of thing, though, because, you know, he wouldn't look like him at all because they aren't related. Or maybe this is only further proof that Mike is a robot, because then people are like, oh William, since when do you have a teenage son that looks just like you? You adopted that thing. I don't know. Who knows? Nobody. That's the point. That's the whole point of this list, okay? Let's move on.